Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, there's a lot to talk about. Fact of the matter is we have Josh and Margot making up, because there's the whole thing. I love the whole conversation about like, oh yeah, there's like the contraception wards are supposed to stay up considering all that's happening over there, because Josh needed to be filled in about everything. And Margot pretty much breaks down the plot about, what Rupert's up to and all that stuff. But also, and I love that, it's like, Margot's kind of like, don't worry about it. My stuff is all set up. And for him, it's like, oh, that's good. Because she's like, the fact of the matter is, I like to have kids, but, maybe like a litter or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, not right now. There's too much going on. But then she was like, I thought you and me were kind of done. But he was like, you sacrifice your own health. Because basically, the strain of having her fairy eyes so far away from her, it's like you put yourself through that to look after me, so how can it, not let us have a fresh start? And it's like, oh, reunion sex. It's like, yeah. And while they're in the middle of that, Penny and Julia are trying to figure out this whole situation. It's like, yeah, they broke up and everything, but for Penny, his dad wasn't in his life, and he wasn't going to let that happen between him and Julia's baby, so he's going to be there for the baby. So there's that whole situation, but then we have Margot, Finn, Elliot, and Josh waking up in Fillory after passing out. And at first I thought it was kind of interesting because I was like, Finn and Elliot were there, and it's like, is this like some crazy Fillorian thing? And she's like, this isn't a dream, because my dreams are usually nicer to me. But I run into Josh and Margot, and I'm like, why these four specifically? It took a little while before, but then like Ember shows up, and I was like, not Ember, Ember shows up. I was like, right. I was like, they're the four. I was like, right, because all four of them were High Kings at one point in time. Even Josh, even if it was for a short point in time, he still was High King. You can make the argument. Finn wasn't High King for that long before she, the Dark King rolled up and kind of dethroned her and everything. She got executed for it. But obviously, that's a whole thing. But I love that whole situation of like, we're seeing Ember again. Well, at least that fake Ember that Margot dealt with last season and everything. And so now he's basically like, oh yeah, I only show up when basically shit goes bad. And he's basically explaining like the whole dead situation. They're like pickles. And it's like, oh, here's the dead. They're like a pickle. Here they're all over messing over Fillory and basically infecting and kind of draining life and basically turning, and then dumps a whole bunch of pickles on top of Fillory. And it's like, that's what's going to end up happening. So that's one side of things. Then we have Umber, who he had a safeguard in case his brother ever decided to blow up come up with something crazy like blowing up the planet. So basically we learn about obviously we know that he was building other worlds. And one particular thing, he built something called the Ark. It's meant to be something that automatically sucks up all the souls of Fillory and puts them on kind of a place to hold so that they can be transported to another world. So, but the whole thing is he never made another world. He had that whole thing about the closest we saw was the world he showed Quentin back in season 2. I think specifically that was season 2's finale. The world he showed Quentin, but sadly he never finished it, because the whole point that Quentin was making is the world just felt empty. It didn't feel alive. He was missing something. So that was the whole conversation. And then it proceeds to, fake Umber and fake Ember proceed to slap each other over and over again. And I love they come back to it. It's like, yeah, they just kind of kept slapping each other. I think they kind of forgot we were even there. So it comes up with a plan. They come up with the plan. All right, so we got to find this Ark and everything. But it is like, well, then what do we do? There's nowhere else to bring, because even Josh is like, well, you see how our planet treats immigrants. It's like, shit's going to be even worse if we bring literally another magical planet here, people from a magical planet. But then, Alice suggests the seed. It's like, well, we can use that. But obviously it's like, well, the couple must have it in some shape or form, because they have the paper and the instructions and everything, but all that's or they don't have the seed yet, because it'd be useless if they don't have the seed. So it's like, if they can find the seed, they can build a world to transport all the Fillorians to. So that's the whole situation. But at the same time, it is kind of a thing of we are going to have to kill Fillory. And they bring up an interesting point. The wellspring is on Fillory, so what does that mean for magic if you destroy Fillory? So that turns into a whole thing too. That was never actually really answered too. I guess, because it's only going to suck up the souls of Fillory. So not unless you like somehow magically like suck up the wellspring and kind of put that. I don't know how you like, because they never found a real solution to that whole situation. So obviously it's kind of divide and conquer type of situation to figure out like, okay, how are we going to deal with this? They need to get to Umber's place in Canada, and it's like, oh, we need a traveler, and lo and behold, who does Penny turn to? None other than Hyman. It's like, yeah, Hyman's the man of the hour. And Hyman wakes up, he's like, oh my God, I'm alive again. And he's enjoying everything. He's like, oh my God. And it's just that thing of like, he's like, yeah, I love fingering stuff. And Julia and Penny are just looking like, ugh. I was like, all right, we got to lay down the rules. No more of that pervert shit, because it's like, you can't get away with that. Even white dudes. I mean, and even Penny had to correct himself, be like, put a little asterisk there, being like, sometimes, they can't get away with this. It's like, ooh, that's a deep commentary. But the fact of the matter is, that it's like you're in a body now, so you can't be a pervert and stuff. And for just almost out of reaction, he sees Julia's pregnant and he's about to touch her belly, and Penny's like, stop, you got to respect personal boundaries and stuff like that. So he ended up talking to Finn, which was interesting, because it's like, because he was like, who are you? And she's like, Finn, I was married to Elliot. And he's like, and she's like, the Florian girl. And he's like, right, the Florian girl. And so it's like, I mean, to be fair, like anytime there's, because I guess in his mind, it's like Finn is a super side character, which is so ironic considering it was literally that entire episode last season that dealt with the quote-unquote side characters, which is so interesting because Katie kind of gets lumped into that. I kind of treat her as a main character. Like, I think a lot of times she kind of gets treated as a side character. I've always kind of treated her as but I think it's because also from season 1, she was gone most of the season. She was kind of gone most of season 2. I feel like season 3 was the first season she was consistently there. She's still kind of in and out. Like, obviously, our main crew are the ones we follow the most, but Katie pops in the most, like, out of any quote-unquote side character. That's just how I've always kind of viewed the situation. But nevertheless, so I guess he wouldn't know about Finn because Finn has never been on Earth kicking it with like the heroes when they're explaining stuff. Usually she's either here by herself doing other stuff. She's not really at the school that often, I guess, for Hyman to have really spied on her. But it's a commonality of like, oh, we're both kind of side characters and stuff. I love him being like, oh, didn't Elliot say that you were from like this backwaters? But very insulting thing about Filler, and she's kind of looking like, wait, he said that? And you have Hyman being like, all right, you weren't there to hear that, were you? But it's kind of like Finn has reservations about this plan and everything. And it's like, if you have, problems, which you obviously do with it, kind of voice your opinion. But, it's like, oh, you're worried that no one's going to listen to you. She's like, no, of course they'll listen to me. But nevertheless, they go to Umber's place. And it's like, oh, he wants to go in. But they're like, nah, we'll call you when we need you. And he's like, yeah, I got plenty of stuff to do. It's like, poor Hyman. Which is so interesting because he's literally talking to two side characters because it's Josh and Finn who've become more main characters than he is. So it's so interesting when you think about it because Hyman's been a minor character. Technically, he's been there the entire adventure because it's kind of like how Chuck in Supernatural, because he's got like Supernatural is the show that he watches. The Magicians is the show that Hyman's been watching from the background the entire time. They've just never known he was there until, Penny 40 got in a situation he was in season 3 that lets him go like when the whole astral projection thing and his body situation is like, wait, Hyman? He's like, yeah, I've been here following the story the entire time. But basically it took Finn answering the question of the fake Umber, kind of the Umber butler. And I like that whole situation of like, okay, all the worlds are going like, oh, where are they? Well, the fact of the matter is you kind of have to, okay, here's all these arcs. One of them's the real one. You got to find out the real. And then Josh is like, if we pick the wrong one, we age super quickly and then we turn to dust like Raiders of the Last Crusade. And it was like, yes. And then everyone's looking around like, oh, ooh. And he's like, yeah, because Umber was such a big fan of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade that he set it up like this. However, for copyright reasons, we can't do that. So the new consequence for picking the wrong arc will be explosive. And I'm like, okay, I love that you had to add it because of copyright reasons. I guess because Umber is very particular about like, respecting copyright laws because, he's the more order aspect, whereas obviously, Ember is more chaotic. And Umber just wanted to respect it. He's probably like, oh, that's someone else's work. Who am I to take someone else's work and kind of do something with it? So I think that's what that really stems from. But I just love that whole thing. And obviously, Finn wants to have nothing to do with this plan. And Elliot ends up talking to her like, yeah, we're sorry that we kind of treat you like that outsider to this whole situation. But for Finn, it's like, you're literally asking me to let you destroy my planet, my world. And it's like, you know, because even when they were going there, she was looking at some paintings. She's like, oh man, I remember this place I grew. Like, I mean, because even she was like, we wouldn't even be, this would be a very different conversation if it was Earth. And even Elliot's kind of like, yeah, it probably would be. And it's like, but it's a thing of like, you're asking me to destroy my entire world. Like, I'm being treated like a minor character. Like, guess I have to be the representative of Fillory of like, we can't do this. But he's like, do you have another plan? We're all ears. And she's like, there isn't one. And so at the end of the day, Elliot was like, all right, then, if you want to be kind of the main character in all of this, you're going to have to be a part of this conversation of you can only choose one or two things. Either you can preserve, like, keeping the planet alive and sacrificing all the people, or you can sacrifice the people and along with all the culture that is Fillory and save it while destroying the planet. Like, that's kind of your only choices. So you have to kind of decide what at the end of the day you want to do. So it is an interesting and complicated situation, you know. It's like you're literally having to be the one, because if you do nothing, like, everything is over. It's not just the end of Fillory, it's the end of everything. So it's like, but it's at the thing, it's like, am I willing to sacrifice my own world and everything that I've held dear? Because it's like, yeah, she's been to Earth, but Earth still isn't her home. This is the place she grew up in, and this is the place she knows everything about. It also shows you, and it's actually kind of effed up, that despite everything, Margot, Elliot, and Josh, no one's ever learned the ins and outs of Fillory. Because I feel like if you were to ask anyone what's the real ins and outs of Fillory, I'd say Quentin would know. But even then, obviously, Fillory wasn't what Quentin, like, because obviously Plover, like, took the stories from the kids, the Chatwin kids, and kind of did its own spin to it. Obviously, that was, like, you know, earth-shattering, you know, learning that truth, you know, last season for Quentin and everything. So I'm curious, like, yeah, I think even he wouldn't know the ins and outs of it like Finn does, because it's like he loves the world and everything, but he loves a very, like, childlike, imaginative version of the world and not the real world. It's the only person amongst our group who would know Fillory inside and out. All there is to know about it would be Finn, you know. So it'd be a very different perspective even from Quentin. So even he, you know, but I'm sure even he, like, and that's kind of something even interesting to think about. Even Quentin would have reservations about destroying a planet, because it's like, especially because he cherished Fillory so much. Hell, he went through so much to save Fillory, you know, and everything multiple times, you know. So it's a really interesting circumstance to kind of think about. Like, at the end of the day, you kind of having to destroy this place, this other world, which is like, it's kind of interesting. You basically becoming world destroyers. We'll get to that in a second. But at the same time, this is all going down. You had the whole situation with Julia and Penny. I love how everyone was knocked out meeting with Umber and Ember. The fact is they had Lipson show up again, and I love that. I feel like this is the most we've seen her, like, in the past couple of seasons. Like, she pops up every once in a while. This is the most consistent we've seen her. It's like, it's almost like, you know, I literally have other stuff to do, because it's like every time you turn around, she's being brought in by one of them to, like, help with some situation, to check up on something. It's like, get someone else. Why's it got to be me? Which is so interesting. She's the only teacher we see consistently over the course of the series. But nevertheless, it's just so interesting in the grand scheme of things. She wants to examine Julia, and obviously Penny's worried about everything, because it's like Julia talks about the fact is that there are, like, obviously she's used the powers and stuff like that, and it's not just like, it would seem like it might have been a one-off thing, but she talks about there have been instances of other stuff, even to the point like it becomes too much, because even with the wards up that she kind of puts on herself to kind of block the voices, she's still reading on people's thoughts, and Penny's trying to be there for them. And he ends up talking to Hyman about, like, you know, what happened? Did anything happen to your mom when she had you? And he was like, no. But then he was like, well, she got lobotomized and stuff like that. But then it's like talked about the fact that his mom just sat out in port. So giving birth to a traveler has huge ramifications. And obviously Penny starts kind of overreacting because of the whole situation. So it's like, oh, here's this, you know, the device. Obviously the couple can't use this if we have it and everything. So because obviously with magic kind of being out of whack, the couple would need this device, obviously, you know, the thing to make it so that not consequences. circumstances are normal again and you can perform magic. So, but Julia didn't appreciate that because it's a situation of just kind of, it seemed like Penny was overstepping his boundaries and stuff like that, which for Penny, he's like, I'm looking after you and the baby. Like, everything I'm doing is trying to make sure that you're okay. But it's at the same time of like, you're not respecting my wishes, which that kind of goes back to a whole conversation earlier, like, well, even last season, because it's like, well, he made the whole choice about whether she should be a god or a human. He made that choice for her. So it kind of fits in that same category. And you have your boy Hyman listening again. It's like, you're not invisible anymore. You got to respect people's boundaries and wishes. Like, you're overstepping. You know, this isn't kind of your story, which obviously Julia kind of compares this to whole Penny not respecting her choices type of situation. So that was a fascinating aspect to it. So, but it was kind of sad because Penny ends up finding Hyman and he's trying to put himself back to like in that slumber. And he's like, what are you doing? It's like, for him, it's like, what's the point of being alive? Because he was so used to he literally spent 100 years as a ghost. And for him, it's a situation of like, there's so many aspects of life. You have to eat all the time. You have to poop all the time, which even Penny was like, no, I think that's kind of just a you situation. But the fact is, it's like living wasn't all that grand because obviously he's also a part of a world he really has no place in, because even like saying like, you know, he can't really interact with people. He can't really talk to people. He's like, that's why I did the whole pervert ghost situation. And he's like, really? Penny was like, he was like, yeah, that was, you know, it was out of loneliness and horniness. So it's like, at least you can admit that as much. But, you know, Penny's like talking about just, you know, kind of give people a chance, like just kind of put yourself, what was it? I forgot what it was exactly that Penny was saying to him. I'm blanking on it, but basically was giving him good advice, which I love. You have Hyman being like, is this one of those situations where you're giving me advice, but in actuality, you're just telling it to yourself? And Penny's like, no, it's just, and it's like, oh, it's actually exactly that moment. Because that's a sad thing for Penny, because, I mean, I forgot to talk about, because for Hyman, he feels like he's a minor character now. Because for him, it's like, this used to be my show, but now I went from being a main character viewer to this, to now, like, I can't keep up with all the juicy stuff that's going down. At least when I was, a quote-unquote ghost, I could catch up to everything. Like, this story, like, it's like, he's basically even saying, like, oh, like, I shipped you and Julia together, which I'm also wondering, is there some part of Hyman that kind of supposed, I mean, obviously he does represent the audience because he's watching The Magicians, which we're watching The Magicians. But the fact of the matter is, it makes you wonder, with stuff like that, when they make references to stuff like that, I'm always curious. Is that something that fans, like fanfic or something like that? Is that something just the writers came up with themselves? Or do you actually kind of pull from it being like, oh yeah, because like they actually saw people, even before things kind of got to where they are, maybe people always wanted to ship Penny and Julia together? Because obviously that didn't become a thing until like Penny 23 came up and he was like, oh yeah, in his world, him and Julia were a thing. And obviously that kind of landed, back in season 3 when he landed in, world 40, timeline 40, regardless of all that. So that's an interesting angle. Another situation to kind of set up is like the fact is, we have Katie and Alice dealing with this whole trying to find the seed situation. It's all to Pete. Pete points them to Morena because she's the only person that's ever had an interaction with the couple. And it turns out, which I still bring up the fact is we only met one half of the couple, which is interesting. I'm wondering, is it going to be a reveal when it gets revealed who the other half is? Maybe not, but it's just interesting. We're only dealing with one so far. Regardless, they have to turn to Morena for help, and it's like, oh, this ain't going to be good. But especially considering the fact that they stopped Morena with the whole like, oh, she was going to use the harmonic convergence to her own benefit. Well, they knock on her door. Turns out she's actually good now because she had some like surgery or whatever to kind of block off like the aggressive side of her, which she was even saying ultimately was self-destructive. So she's good now, offering them cookies, and it's like they're poison. It's like, Katie was like, those might be poison, so why would we eat them? It's like, well, the fact of the matter is I'm not asking you guys for anything, because she was like, Katie was like, this has to be a scam or something. It's like, but I'm not asking you guys for anything. Actually, you came to me for help. Well, it turns out obviously like once again, the whole interesting serendipity of it all. Turns out the big heist that Morena was planning was going after the world seed. She needed the power from the convergence to rob the couple of the seed, because and it's like that explains why she had the interaction with the couple. Because I was like, what circumstances would have led you to that before? But that explains why. But the sad thing is, she didn't explain this, But later on, Katie and Alice find out it's like, oh, she tried to go through with the robbery anyway without the power to convergence. Shit went super wrong. And it turns out, lo and behold, who got involved? Gavin. Oh, from the library? He's like, I'm not with the library anymore. Because I forgot because the last time we saw him, he was randomly in like some club with some ladies or something like that. I mean, we still never went back to find out like what exactly is up with the status of the library. Maybe we'll never really kind of go back to that. Obviously, because that whole thing was like, oh yeah, that was all in Alice's head. So those books are probably still burned. Also curious like what Zelda's doing. I'm assuming it would have something to do with Harriet, but maybe not. But I do know that Zelda pops up in the next episode, so we'll probably get answers to that, spoilers and everything. Well, not really spoilers because I didn't really watch too much of the. We'll get to there soon enough. But the fact is that poor Gavin is kind of messed up because it's like, oh, if the whole situation is like he's in this situation because Morena basically sitting them like lambs to the slaughter. One of the people is dead. He got it super bad. And so it's like Gavin's like, at least I'm luckily enough to be in this situation. Sadly, I have to listen to that dude in my room talk all the time. And if you wake him up, I swear I will kill all of your mothers. Notice Alice didn't comment on that conversation. I'm curious what she would have said of like the whole Stephanie thing. It's like, well, I mean, her and Stephanie have gotten closer. Still definitely have their issues. But then like you have Katie being like, Morena kind of beat you to the punch. And he's like, and you're still working with her? To be fair, it's not the same Morena that killed her mom, but it's Morena nevertheless. And so this Morena, given her opportunity, probably still would have killed her mom. Even though they're from a different timeline, it's still kind of the same evil Morena. Which is so interesting when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, because Timeline 40 Morena was kind of good. I mean, considering everything that kind of went down. But, and I think it's just interesting that 23 Morena is trying to be good now too. But Alice and Katie suggest like, no, we're going to have to actually go full-blown Morena ourselves, and are threatening to kind of remove the wards that kind of keep him from having to hear people's voices. And it's like, oh, you're so tired of hearing him talk all the time. Well, once we remove your wards, the fact is everyone's going to hear it. And it's like, oh, he's like, oh, you're not like Morena. I underestimate you. You're not like Morena. You're worse. And it's like, really, dude? Come on. You're the scummy shit you did with the library. Just shut up. It's like, yeah, we're not bad. We're not like Morena. We're just desperate. So it gives him information about Anna. Turns out Anna, and we learned about this last season because remember what Morena had said, she broke, like things got complicated between her and her girlfriend, so she, in her own timeline, but now she hooked up with her timeline 40 counterpart to make it so like I already know all the mistakes I made with my girlfriend in timeline 23. I'm gonna apply them to this one because I got a clean slate and I know what not to do. But it turns out it's like, oh, everything they got involved in. Plus it's like, oh, did you know that she's from a different timeline? It's like, oh yeah, that probably would be kind of a snafu in a relationship. I mean, come on. Some people are from a different country. Other people are from a different continent. Other people are from a different timeline entirely. It's like, come on, so that's a whole interesting thing, which is funny. But I guess it's like, well, Julia at least was upfront and knew that Penny 23 was from a different timeline, so it's a little different with the whole like, oh, it just kind of getting kind of thrust upon you like, oh, so I know the actress who played Anna looks so familiar. I feel like I feel like I've seen her in something. I just can't place what it is. But nevertheless, it is a whole situation of like, Morena, because of the way she is, can't lie because they're like, oh, like Morena won't be involved in this at all. You won't have to be involved. We'll just do the robbing of the couple. But then it's like, Morena's like, no, you kind of need me because I'll kind of know the ins and outs of this whole plan. So basically they have this word is my bond type of situation of setting that up because it's like, well, we can't be Morena in this situation. We need old shitty Morena back. So which I feel so bad saying that. But, to be fair, she's kind of an asshole. She's kind of evil. We have to get that Morena back so that we can get her to lie, because now that she's good, she can't lie. But if we get evil Morena back, she can easily bold-faced lie to Anna that she won't be involved in everything, and that we can get the book. And lo and behold, basically, because they had to set up the word of my bonds to make it so that, when it's all said and done, you don't try and screw us over and everything, that, we have some safeguards to this whole situation. So, and then we have Evil Morena kind of just, and they feel bad about it because it's like, oh, it's just like they feel evil about it because it's like, and there she is being faking being, it's like, oh, I'm a new person now, so me and Anna are going to work on a relationship. It's like, oh, that feels so gross. To be fair, it's literally the same aspect of, oh, I've dated her in timeline 23, I know what mistakes not to make. So it's on the same level of grossness that you're just kind of like, which I always joke about it with the Flash and stuff like that Barry and Iris's relationship is a little complicated because of the whole thing of like, well, you kind of were with Iris from a different timeline and everything, so that's kind of an issue. I mean, you made out with Iris on a different Earth, then you made out with Iris in a different timeline when he created Flash, which it kind of falls on that same category. And I'm like, you can look at that as a little weird when you actually think about it. It's a whole complicated, it's a whole thing. So so I was like, I'm really interested to kind of dive into like, oh, how you're going to go about stealing from the couple. Okay, so that is another angle to it. Then let's circle back to, lo and behold, Julia runs into Effingham, and it's like, oh, and he's like, I've come to you, and she's like, wasn't Todd supposed to be your hero? And it's like, yeah, I think he's not quite up to it. But then he was like, now basically in this desperate time, he kind of has to turn to Julia. It's basically like, I couldn't find anyone else at least somewhat capable, because I don't think Todd was. But the fact of the matter is, so I kind of have to sully myself and come to you. It's pretty much how he said it. I even love him being like, oh, you're a lot more pregnant than I thought. It's like, oh, but you're not wearing a wedding band. And it's like, nope. And it's like, are you a widower? And she's like, no. And it's like, oh, you're raising a bastard. And she's like, I'm talking to one right now. So Effingham, it kind of explains everything. And I love the little twist to this whole situation where he was like, oh yeah, like I've got a clear vision of like this whole apocalypse thing. People who are from another world who travel to Fillory, who've been back and forth to Fillory. I was like, huh? And my ears start picking up. And then the moment he was like, oh, through a tree. And she was like, oh. And it was like, wait. She was like at first trying to figure out, and it clicked for Julia like, wait. Realizing that the prophecy was about them destroying Fillory and taking all the souls of Fillory. And it's like, oh, so the fact that must mean that they succeed and bring them to a different planet. But then he was like, whoa, I never said anything about a different, it's you, what kind of evil corrupted you? But for her, it's like, we're doing this because we have to save Fillory for something that's coming. But he's just kind of, blasphemous, like blah, blah, blah. He's not willing to listen. But it's a situation of we're doing this for Fillory's sake. But for him, it's like, you can say that, but the fact of the matter is destroying Fillory will come at a price. You will lose all the people that you love. And I'm like, which I was wondering, I was like, why would Fillory, is it just a failsafe that Ember came up with? I mean, to be fair, he was going to destroy Fillory back in season 2 anyway, just because he got bored of it. So it's like, why would it suffer the ramifications of that? Not unless there's something else at play here with that whole Effingham situation. Someone suggested something earlier in the season, like, I'm not going to get into right now, but I'm like, concerning the actor playing Effingham, like if that ended up being the case, but I'm like, if that was the case, wouldn't that mean that this whole thing is kind of a setup? Or maybe there's truth to it. Maybe it's just supposed to be make her reserved about the action she's going to make. I have no idea. Because part of me is like, maybe the whole choosing Todd is because you didn't actually want a hero. You wanted like, I don't know. It's so interesting because it's like literally when it comes down to the wire, you come to them about the apocalypse, but it turns out they're the apocalypse. And obviously she brings that up to Penny, which is like, oh, that's nasty and complicated. So it's like, what do you do? Because it's kind of like, now you know there's going to be ramifications like this, which is ironic. That apocalypse you were so quick to jump on to try and stop ultimately ends up being you. So you have to stop yourself. Turns into like a timey-wimey thing of like, oh, it's interesting how this kind of comes full circle. The apocalypse I'm supposed to stop is the apocalypse I caused, but I have to cause the apocalypse for the vision to happen, for Effingham to be like, oh, Julia. Because it's like, you kind of threw this quest in my face. You told me about it. And, regardless, it's an interesting situation. But then we had this moment where Penny opens up to Julia and explains why it isn't the reason why he was asking Hyman the way he was asking the question about that was like because it stemmed from his own personal situation. Because basically he thought his mom kind of had a breakdown just because his dad left, but it turns out it was a ramification of having him being pregnant with a traveler. And basically it didn't go away, and so. Like, even when she gave birth, it still didn't go away to the point she burned down their house. He first got it. Then he was like, that's when I first got into foster system. I caught on it. I was like, first, she got him back, but then so on and so forth. And it just kept happening until, like, kind of had to cut ties. And obviously he blames himself. He's like, I fucked my mom up because of me being born. And he doesn't want that same thing to happen to Julia because obviously he cares about her, you know? And it was just really, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, you would assume that Penny 40 had a similar situation. Like, I mean, that's interesting, but we never dived into Penny's past at all like that. There might be instances in the past, but we never really did a deep dive into his family life like that. Because truth be told, it's the only characters we've ever really dived into when it comes to their... I mean, we spent a lot of time with Alice's complicated family situation. Quentin, we got little dabbles here with his mom last season, but obviously the biggest connection with him was his dad. Julia's family only came up in season 1, so that was never a bigger plot point. Katie's situation with her mom. So amongst our main characters, even Margot, Elliot, we got an instance of his dad. Margot taught us a little bit about, so it's interesting. They've sprinkled in here with a lot of other characters, but I say like the ones you spent the most time with their family, it honestly is Alice, but probably behind that would be Quentin. But even then, I'd still say like Alice has the biggest, because she's like more stories have like episodes and storylines have revolved around her parents more than it has anyone else's family. So it is interesting when I break it down like that. Oh yeah, you actually have dived a little bit into everyone's family. Just even a time to even Josh's family a little bit. So it's just interesting to think about. But along with all this, lo and behold, Penny returns to find, hey, Fog 17 got free. And at first I was like, did freaking Hyman let him go out? Like, how did this? He's working with the couple, and it's like, oh, you shouldn't piss off so many evil people at once. And, you know, they kind of let him go because he wasn't about to let, because if he tries to stop Fog would end up doing something to Julia and the baby. So it's like, okay, so what do we do now? We got to tell the gang they need to jump on this, stealing the seed immediately. I forgot to talk about it, but Finn ended up coming because Margot tried to pick one. Ultimately failed, and all the globes are exploding, but Finn grabs the one that ends up being the case. I was like, oh, how did you know that? Because it was a seahorse, and seahorses is actually how Ember and Umber ferried basically all the people to Fillory. I guess it's kind of like their version of the stork, which is like, oh, how are humans brought to Earth? And it's like, oh, yeah, the same thing. It's like interesting. It's really interesting when you kind of learn like Ember and Umber came from like a tiger going into the water and what was like 2 shells coming, like washing up. It kind of ended up being their backstory. That was kind of interesting. But I'm also surprised, I mean, I guess, with that, sadly with everything going down, I'm surprised we've never met any of the old gods. We met that dude near the end of last season who was a representative of the old gods. He wasn't an old god himself, but he was just kind of like, oh, you guys are kind of insignificant. You just managed to find your way here, blah, blah, blah. It's a whole thing. So that's the closest name, but still, I guess it's kind of very befitting to a certain extent, considering the fact is the old gods never get mixed up in mortal shit anyway. It's just the newer gods, which is like home lady who took the binder. The goddess that wanted to be a human. Like, what's going to happen with that? Maybe that's going to circle back around? I don't know. But a lot of really interesting things to kind of keep in mind going forward. I got a little peek into next week's episode because, I kind of hate watching previews because I want to go into the next episode knowing as little as possible. But it turns out we're dealing with the final music episode, which is like, oh, because of the final thing, but at the same time, it's like, oh, but I didn't even think about it. We're getting a final musical, which is interesting. I love that that's been a thing about this series, that since season 2, they've always made a point to have one musical episode every season. And I love that that's kind of been a staple in the show. And at the very least, we do end it off in that regard. So I'm interested to find out the story, but also the musical. I'm ready to boogie, and it's just I love that that's a staple in this show. That's become a staple. So I love that. So it's nice to know that. So I'm curious to see where all that ends up taking us, because to my knowledge, next week's episode is episode 12. Obviously, typically the show is 13 seasons. I don't know if that's going to change, this being the final episodes. I'm assuming this is still going to only be 13, not unless they filmed more, but I don't think they did. I think it is just going to end where it is. I don't know, because there might be a situation of with stuff like this, with production schedules and stuff like that. I never know, like, whether something's like, oh, we filmed an extra something after all, like, you know, to kind of give it a kind of a proper ending. I don't know. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. Either way, like I said, we still got time, little time, but even the smallest amount of time matters. Either way, I'm so excited to see what the next musical, you know, the final musical episode is going to look like, you know. So it's going to be interesting to see where even just all the story ends up taking us going forward. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.